"Hi, Emily," Daniel greeted, his voice softer than she remembered. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Thanks for coming." Emily sat down, her posture straight and her expression guarded. "I'm not sure why I'm here, Daniel, but I figured hearing you out might help me finally close this chapter." Daniel nodded, taking a moment to compose himself. "I don't deserve your time, but I appreciate it anyway. I know I've already apologized, but I needed to do it face to face. What I did was inexcusable, and I've spent years regretting it. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand, and for that, I'm so sorry." Emily studied him carefully. This was a different Daniel from the one she remembered. Less polished, more vulnerable. "I've heard your apologies, Daniel. What I don't understand is why now? Why reach out after all this time?" He looked down at his hands, the guilt etched into his face. "Because I've been carrying this weight for too long. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to at least acknowledge what I did and take responsibility for it. After Claire and I ended things, I hit a low point. I realized how much it destroyed, not just our marriage, but my own sense of who I was. Therapy helped me see that, and I've been working on becoming someone better." Emily listened silently, letting his words sink in. She couldn't deny that part of her wanted to believe him, to see the sincerity in his actions. But another part of her, the part still scarred from his betrayal, remained skeptical. "You know," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion, "it took me years to stop blaming myself for what happened. I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? Was I not enough? But I've learned that your choices had nothing to do with me and everything to do with you." That realization saved me. Daniel nodded, his expression pained. "I know. And you were always more than enough, Emily. The problem was me. I was selfish, insecure, and too much of a coward to face my own issues. I took the easy way out, and I hurt the one person who loved me unconditionally." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat, but she refused to let her emotions take over. "Hearing that now doesn't change what you did. It doesn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep or the years I spent rebuilding my self-worth. But it does help to know that you've acknowledged your mistakes, that you're not just sweeping them under the rug." Daniel looked at her with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "I don't expect anything from you, Emily. I just wanted you to know that I'm not the same man I was back then. And if there's anything I can do to help you heal, please tell me." Emily sighed, her gaze drifting out the window. "You can't undo the past, Daniel. But maybe this conversation is enough. Maybe hearing you take responsibility is the closure I needed." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past hanging between them. Finally, Emily stood up. "I don't hate you, Daniel. I did for a long time, but holding on to that anger only hurt me. I've let it go, and I've found peace. I hope you find it too." Daniel stood as well, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Emily, for listening, for giving me this chance. I'll never forget it." As she walked away, Emily felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The encounter hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. She had faced the man who had once broken her and walked away stronger, more sure of herself than ever. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions for Emily. The conversation with Daniel had stirred up memories she thought she had buried. But instead of feeling weighed down by them, she found herself reflecting on how much she had grown. She was no longer the woman who doubted her worth because of someone else's actions. She was resilient, self-assured, and proud of the life she had built. Her friends noticed the change in her demeanor. "You seem lighter," her best friend Rachel remarked one evening as they shared a bottle of wine. "Like you finally let go of something." Emily smiled. "I think I have." Confronting Daniel wasn't about him, it was about me. I needed to know that I could face my past without it defining me. Rachel raised her glass. "To moving forward." "To moving forward," Emily echoed, clinking her glass with Rachel's. One day, Emily received a surprising letter in the mail. It was from Claire. The handwriting was unmistakable, and for a moment, Emily debated whether to open it. After a deep breath, she unfolded the letter and began to read. "Dear Emily, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, and I wouldn't blame you if you threw this letter away. But I need to say what's been on my mind for years. I was wrong. What I did to you was unforgivable, and I've carried that guilt with me every day. Losing you, my sister, my family, has been the greatest regret of my life. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I hope you found happiness, and I hope someday you can think of me without pain. With love, Claire." Emily sat with the letter in her hands, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't sure if she could forgive Claire, but she realized she didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't about absolving someone else. It was about freeing herself from the chains of anger and resentment. She folded the letter and placed it in a box of keepsakes, not ready to decide what to do with it yet. For now, she was content to let time do its work. Months later, Emily stood at the edge of a cliff during one of her weekend hikes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. She had faced her pain, confronted her past, and come out stronger on the other side. Emily opened her eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. The future was hers to create, and she was ready to embrace it. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said softly as Emily sat down across from him. His voice was cautious, almost fragile, like he wasn't sure how much weight it could bear. "I wasn't sure if you would." Emily's expression was neutral, but the stiffness in her posture betrayed the storm of emotions churning within her. "I almost didn't," she admitted after a pause. "But I figured it was better to hear you out than to keep wondering." The cafe was warm and bustling, a sharp contrast to the chill that had settled between them. Daniel had chosen a quiet table in the corner, away from the crowd, and Emily appreciated the gesture, even if she wouldn't say it out loud. She'd spent weeks debating whether to agree to this meeting, replaying their last confrontation in her mind, wondering if anything he could say would make a difference. Now, sitting across from him, she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was to come. Their conversation began awkwardly, each word chosen carefully, as if stepping through a minefield. But as the minutes ticked by, something unexpected happened. They found a rhythm. Daniel wasn't the same man who had shattered her trust all those months ago. His voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before, an edge of vulnerability that caught her off guard. "I know I hurt you, Emily," he began, his hands gripping his coffee cup like it was the only thing grounding him. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about why I did what I did, and I realized it was never about you. It was about me, my insecurities, my fears. I let them control me, and in doing so, I ruined something beautiful." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. She wanted to lash out, to tell him that his epiphany came far too late, but she held her tongue. She had promised herself that she would listen, truly listen, even if it hurt. "I'm not trying to justify my actions," Daniel continued. "There's no excuse for the way I betrayed your trust. But I need you to know that I've changed, that I've worked on myself. Not because I think it will fix what I broke, but because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." Emily leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Her emotions swung wildly, from anger to sadness to a strange sense of relief she hadn't expected. Hearing him take responsibility was validating in a way. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded her that the problem had never been her. When Daniel finally stopped speaking, the silence between them felt heavy, but not unbearable. Emily took a sip of her tea, buying herself a moment to gather her thoughts. "Daniel," she said slowly, her voice steady, "I appreciate your honesty, but understanding your reasons doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the pain or the betrayal." Her words hung in the air, and Daniel nodded, his expression a mix of regret and acceptance. Emily continued, her gaze steady. "I've worked hard to move on. I've rebuilt my life, piece by piece, and am proud of where I am now. Meeting you today, it reminded me of how far I've come. And it also reinforced that I made the right decision to leave." Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly, and he looked down at his coffee. "I don't expect forgiveness, Emily. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'll carry the regret of losing you for the rest of my life." For a moment, Emily said nothing. Then, to her own surprise, she responded bluntly, "Good. You should." The words were sharper than she intended, but she didn't regret them. "That regret is yours to bear, not mine. I've let go of the anger, not for you, but for me. I deserve peace, Daniel. And so do you, in whatever form that takes." Daniel met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected: respect. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for hearing me out, for giving me this chance, even if I didn't deserve it." As they stood to leave, Emily felt a strange lightness in her chest. The meeting hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. She hadn't realized how much she needed this closure until she got it. Seeing Daniel again hadn't reopened old wounds. Instead, it reminded her of her own strength, her resilience. She walked out of the cafe with her head held high, ready to continue living her life on her own terms. In the weeks that followed, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into her passions, rediscovering the joy of painting and writing, activities she had once abandoned in the chaos of her relationship with Daniel. She deepened her relationships with friends and family, cherishing the connections that had supported her through her darkest days. She even began dating again, cautiously but optimistically. Each new experience was a lesson in trusting her instincts and setting boundaries. Her time with Daniel had taught her the importance of valuing herself, of never settling for less than she deserved. She knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to embrace the possibilities ahead. One evening, as she was scrolling through her emails, a familiar name caught her eye. The subject line was simple: "Thank you." Heart racing, she hesitated before clicking it open. The message was short and to the point. "Emily, I just wanted to thank you for meeting me. It meant more to me than I can put into words. I hope you find all the happiness you deserve. Take care." Daniel. Emily read the email twice before closing her laptop. She didn't feel the need to respond. The chapter with Daniel had finally been closed, and she had no desire to reopen it. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. She was free, free of the anger, the pain, and the doubts that had haunted her for so long. As the months turned into years, Emily continued to grow. She opened her own art studio, turning her passion into a thriving business. Her friends often marveled at her transformation, noting how much happier and more confident she seemed. Emily knew they were right. She had found herself again, piece by piece, and it felt incredible. One afternoon, while tidying up her studio, Emily stumbled upon an old photograph of herself and Daniel. For a moment, she considered throwing it away, but then she paused, tracing the edges of the photo with her fingertips. It was a reminder of where she had been, of how far she had come. Smiling, she tucked it into a drawer and returned to her work. Her journey hadn't been without its challenges, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt truly free. She had built a life filled with love, passion, and purpose, a life on her own terms. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all.